So the problem with being in jail is there is no good books. There's just Harlequin Romance, and for me it was these years had gone by, and it was horrible things. That's why you got to have friends, so that again, it's like Donald Trump said, you're going to protect the downside so the upside takes care of itself. If you're ever in jail for some reason, again, if you got people that love you enough to send you at least a calculus textbook so that you can become an engineer and be the one grabbing the curves of Lauren Day instead of that Hawaiian calculus man who hooked up with six-figure income because he knows calculus. I think that's what we need to be doing to rehabilitate people. But whatever it is, and the key here is there was, toward the end, there were a few good books that came out, and they were decommissioned from the library in Pahrump, the Pahrump Community Library, and they brought them and donated it to the detention center on East Siri Lane. One of them was the financial report that stemmed from the 2008 financial crisis that was put out. It was a book written by committee, that famous one. Another, and I will talk about that later because I talk about how my learning style, especially since we're playing catch up, is you would sit there, read it, and dream of if you went to Northwestern and you were getting an undergraduate degree in say journalism, so you could get a master's degree in say journalism, because in order to be one of these kinds of people with the tortoiseshell glasses that hooks up with the girl with the tortoiseshell glasses over at Chicago Tribune, because you get to work in the New York Times, or right, patriarchy, it's a real thing whether you're liberal or not, which is you work at the New York Times, so you got to hook up with the girl at Chicago Tribune, or the LA Times. I'm New York and she's LA, and I can go across the country because they pay me so much, because these are the big name newspapers and I can grab the curves. But the other one was a book by Paul Johnson called The History of American People, or something like that. It was a history of the American people. I got to skim through it, and it was a great book. And I think the most crucial thing here is that there were two names, and you go into the index, one of those names was Tupac Shakur, and another one of those names was indeed bell curve co-author with Richard Herrnstein himself, all that research stemming from Arthur Jensen and their sociological perspective on what to do with it, the bell curve. Charles Murray from UC Berkeley, very, very important historical figure. But if you look at those two names, you go back to the page in the book, at least this was the print edition that I had, those names did not appear. The Tupac was not on that page, and Charles Murray was not on the page. It was listed in the index. And so I'm wondering what's going on here. So I tried to look, okay, let's go look back at other names. No, that name appears on the page, that name appears on the page, that name appears on the page. I'm wondering why is this? Maybe Paul Johnson was throwing down some hints about something. It might have to do with these people exist because of cheap electricity. And what defines real history, what defines someone getting to exist in the history books, and with the exception of a few people we had to let break in because of cheap electricity, they probably wouldn't be there, because by all accounts, at least if you're someone learning history by reading the index, as you're a name dropper kind of person like I am, so let's see whose names they dropped and let's go read what Johnson said about them. Tupac isn't there, and neither is Charles Murray. Computer himself, Charles Murray. I think that's why they had to put all that, and we'll talk about that separately at a certain point. I think why they had to put all that stuff in toward the end there in the bell curve, when Charles Murray and Herrnstein were writing about how people that can manipulate technology and computers, that requires a lot of intelligence, not necessarily. I think he was sitting in front of a computer at the time. This was 1991, and they had spreadsheets, and he knew about spreadsheets, and spreadsheets aren't so hard to manipulate. I think it gave dumb people a lot of ability that some people would say they shouldn't have, but they did it. And so I can see at least where we keep it open, who owns the properties across a certain geographic area, so I can find concentrations of wealth and say I should break into your family and marry into your family. I should retroactively marry into your family because I should have been around you beautiful, gorgeous people since I was in my teens.